What's up, everybody? This is Edward, your favorite homeboy. You know, this pandemic has really created havoc for a lot of families in so many ways. One of the ways, of course, is financially. And we have a lot of people out there who can't even pay for basic housing needs. They can't pay their mortgage, they can't pay their rent. And as a property manager, of course, that cuts deep into what we do, and we represent so many landlords. And so I want to make this video and just address what we're doing as a property management company and also what I'm doing individually as a landlord. As the news of the pandemic came out around the March timeframe, it was really hard to digest and forecast all of this news and how it's going to affect our company really until the month of April hit, because that's when rent collection is. And then we'd really get a true picture on how many delinquencies we'd have due to the pandemic. At the end of the day, we're estimating we're probably about 2 to 4% delinquent rents due to this pandemic, which is not as bad as we thought it would be, but we're definitely expecting May to be a lot worse. So I wanted to take a few minutes to respond on how we as a property management company have been changing what we've done and how we're prepared to respond to some of these delinquent notices that we're getting from the tenants. But before I do that, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, it would really help us out a lot. Just look down beneath your screen and hit the subscribe button. And you'll notice right down below the subscribe button, right beside it, there's a bell. If you hit the notifications bell, it'll automatically notify you of future videos. So with that, let's get started. And of course, let's talk about maintenance first. You know, maintenance has really not changed too much. We are still asking tenants to submit the work orders, but just try to submit the more time-sensitive ones. And if it's not time-sensitive, just to kind of hold off on that. But we still want them to submit work orders, give a record of the condition of the damage that they see. And we are still sending vendors just like we normally do, but we are asking our vendors to take some more precautions, such as wearing protective masks, wiping down surfaces and doorknobs when they leave, leaving their shoes at the door, wearing foot coverings. We're also asking tenants if they could try to be out of the house or be in another room. So still having to take care of these work orders because we want to be prepared for a long-term solution. We can't just stop doing work orders. We just have to do it more carefully and more differently. You'll see that is probably a running theme in how we've changed our processes. Walkthroughs and showings, let's talk about that next. So for all of our walkthroughs, we typically have a walkthrough technician accompany the tenant for a pre-move-in walkthrough, a post-move-in walkthrough, and a renewal walkthrough. However, now we're doing unaccompanied walkthroughs, and whenever possible, we're having the tenant push the photos to us instead of us taking the photos. So it's still working. It's actually more efficient because it involves less coordination with a walkthrough technician, and we're putting the burden on the tenants to send us the photos, but we are giving them some guidance as far as what to take photos of and that type of thing. As far as showings are concerned, we're not doing any showings where the property is occupied. We do want to wait for the property to be vacant, and then we'll show the property. We're leveraging photos and leveraging videography whenever possible, but we just don't want to mess with any of the complications and any of the liability with showing a home while it's occupied, and we have no way to vet the health history and the interaction history of those going in to the home, and we just don't want to put the tenants, the residents, in a position that they're uncomfortable with, okay? Number 3 would be just a good old-fashioned rent reminders, just to let tenants know that rent is still due. If you have a problem, notify us immediately, but rent is still due. And the significance of rent. You know, rent has really a triple impact. It's not just covering for their housing, their basic housing needs, but it also helps provide for the employees of Mars Hill and affects their families. It also affects the family of the landlord who still needs that money to take care of the house. So we just want to try to help tenants see the big picture, that their rent is important. It affects many people, not just their own families. So what happens if a tenant legitimately cannot pay rent because they've lost employment? Well, what we do is we first of all tell them that we're waiving our late fees for this period. So for the next 2 to 3 months, we're waiving late fees because this is just such a drastic situation. We want to do at minimum what we can do, which is waive the late fees. And then we ask them to fill out a questionnaire to kind of let us know what their situation is, making sure that they've explored other options like family or community help, make sure they filed for unemployment, and then we redirect them to our Facebook page, which gives them resources for, again, job opportunities, helpful videos that show them where they can get financial help and how to do that. So we try to redirect them to our Facebook page. And then as far as a baseline negotiation, we're trying to start with the tenant being able to just pay half a month for April, half a month for May, and then the remainder of the balance being spread out over the course of the term of the lease. And then we reevaluate that every 60 days based off employment status, financial status. So we know there's not a one-size-fits-all solution, but that's kind of our starting point. We also want to try to help the tenant understand that this is as much of a benefit to them as it is for us, that if they can't pay anything for the first month, then in addition to taking those first 30 days to really try to look for employment or for getting unemployment money, getting new employment or sources of income, they should seriously consider alternate plans for housing. And the way we try to explain that to them is if they can't pay anything now, it doesn't mean the money's forgiven. It's just going to be having to be paid back later. So the real question is, how much debt do they want, right? If they can't pay it for the first month, and then the first month comes and goes, now they're looking into the second month. Now that's 2 months of debt that they'll be carrying. And so really they should be looking at their situation. Does it look realistic that I can get back on my feet? Or do I need a request through the property manager that they can make a request to the landlord that I can be let out of my lease early to reduce the amount of debt I'm having? Because once you get past 1 to 2 months of rent, it's really difficult to pay that back. So all this information about maintenance, walkthroughs, rent reminders, that's been communicated to the tenants. The financial preparedness, the mindset that tenants have to have when they aren't paying debt, that it's not forgiven, that it's future debt, that's very important to communicate to the tenants. We do that over the phone just because it's more of a touchy subject. Another thing that landlords should do is look into forbearance options with their lender. That could buy you some more time. It may not be a good fit for everybody, but that's definitely, lenders are pretty overwhelmed because that option is on the table for a lot of landlords as well. As a property management company, 2 things that we're doing to give us a little bit more margin financially. Well, first of all, we are prepared. We operate the company very lean and conservatively financially, don't carry any debt. But there's 2 programs that I've ran across. One is the EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which gives about $10,000 as a grant in addition to some other loans. There may be some that are forgivable, but the $10,000 is part of the EIDL. And the other great program is called the PPP. That stands for Paycheck Protection Program. I've never considered government subsidies and bailouts, but that was just too good to pass up. It's like 2.5 times the payroll that's given to you as a grant. And so those 2 ideas give my company another layer of protection. And so that's what we're doing as a property management company to prepare financially as well. So that's pretty much it. That's what we're doing to respond to this pandemic so far. I can tell you that these past few weeks have been just pretty crazy, filled with tons of Zoom meetings from every association that we belong to, Realtor Association, Property Manager Association. Every vendor's giving us tips on how we can do things differently, and my head is filled with a lot of information. And the good news is, as I'm watching these videos and these conference calls, I do feel like we're prepared. We're doing a lot of things and processes that are already being recommended, we're already doing. We had a great head start because we began as a remote company, 100% paperless, and that really gave us a good head start. You know, it really could be overwhelming as we try to make best decisions for our company, for the landlords, and for the tenants. And it's easy to let this pandemic distract you and consume you. I had to be very deliberate about not letting that happen to me, just turning the news off and declining the Zoom meetings because it just could be very overwhelming. There are a few things that you just can't turn off though, like a death in the family. And recently, just a few days ago, I learned about a death in my family, my dear cousin, Dave Lui in New York. And he passed away. He was in his mid to late 30s. And the details surrounding his death are still unknown. We're still trying to figure that out. But just having this pandemic going on, it makes everything so stressful because even the process of mourning is difficult. You can't even physically be around the people you love and want to hug them and be close to them. Even my cousin Victor, Dave's older brother, who was last in contact with him, has to be self-quarantined for 2 to 3 weeks. So it just makes the process that much more difficult. Dave's death reminds me that every day we have is really just a blessing. As a landlord, don't be too distracted by all the things around you, whether your tenant can pay rent or not. Those are not things you can control, but it's more productive to focus on things you can control and not on what we can't control. So as landlords, we should be focusing on that. There's a verse in the Bible that says, as long as I have breath, I will praise the Lord. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to use my breath, my time, my day to focus on God and focus on the things I can control, not the things I can't control. So instead of the PPP that the government gave me as a bailout, I want to give you a PPP. My version of the PPP are things that you can control and you can focus on, and not things you can't control. The first P is practical. Do the things that are practical, just like what I was telling you earlier, focusing on making sure that your business is taken care of, your house is taken care of, you're on top of the regulations, but just don't let it consume you. You got to focus on what's practical. That's the first P. The second P is personal. You've got to make room for a personal focus. For me, that's my relationship with God and my relationship with others. You've got to focus on the personal. My kids are with me every day now, and they see what daddy's doing, and they're watching me. And so I want to make sure that I'm setting a good example. I want to make sure that I'm taking the time between 8 and 9 p.m. to do family game night. I think last night we played Exploding Kittens, and we got the expansion pack too. And my younger daughter beat the pants out of me, so I'm coming for her next time. But play games with your kids. For us, it's going to online church together and just sitting down in the living room and making sure that we don't miss that family time. So the second P is personal, practical, personal, and the third is productive. Be productive. Don't just binge watch Netflix this whole time. Use it productively. Use it to learn something new. My son, he's picking up guitar. He's playing guitar every now and then. My daughters love art, so my wife, she bought some canvases and some paint, and they're painting. They're doing art. My wife, she loves to bake, and so she's trying out new recipes. Me, I'm finally getting around to building my bridge that I've been putting off for 2 years. So build something, do something, learn something. It was fun because just the other day, my parents, after self-quarantining for 2 weeks, came over, and they're hanging out with us now for a few days. They taught us how to play some mahjong. So we're learning how to play mahjong. And of course, so they taught my kids how to play mahjong. My daughter had to teach my dad how to do a TikTok video. That was really fun. So remember the 3 P's to focus on. That's practical, personal, and productive. That's what I'm focusing on, and I hope you can keep that in mind too. Remember, God's bailout plan is way more valuable than any bailout plan the government can give you. He bailed us out through Jesus so that we can experience forgiveness and a relationship with God in heaven. Dave, I love you, my brother. I'll see you in heaven one day. And until that day, with every breath that I have, I'm going to praise God. This is your favorite homeboy, signing out.